Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Dribble Drive, episode 43. It's an NCAA Tournament preview. Austin Renner, Dalton Shetler, your hosts with you on March 18th. We're getting you ready for the NCAA Tournament. 12 Big Ten teams will be partaking in the festivities starting Thursday night with Washington in a play-in game and games throughout Friday and Saturday. Dalton and I are heading in our separate directions this week. Dalton, NCAA prep, man, how are you?
Grinding through. I'm praying my internet stays connected, unlike last week, so no more carpool karaoke, as Dave Marcus wrote to me. Just grinding through some prep, just like you. But hey, you and I, we're both to the Carolinas. Maybe we could just ride the same jet and just parachute out or something.
Well,
Think
I
the
would
same way.
think the NCAA is probably trying to figure that out right now. Like, how can we get Austin and Dalton just to share a jet here? And we could probably make it work. Rent a car when we get down there. Yeah, that wouldn't be an issue.
It works. It's all
I
about your
think
landing.
you and
on the
I
first
could
day.
probably get our own jet, is what they're probably thinking,
Yeah.
and let the teams fly separate.
I'll have my people talk to your people. And we'll
Okay,
figure it all out.
perfect. Yeah, that would be great. We've got a lot to get to here on this episode. I just want to brush through a couple of non-tournament discussions before we jump all the way in. For the Minnesota Golden Gophers, a tough finish to the year. They do miss the tournament. They will be in the WBIT. That's going to open up Thursday night at the Barn against Toledo. So we'll try and talk about the Gophers as applicable throughout this tournament season. Portal is wide open, Dalton, and it's a wild, wild west again. Here are some of the big names. Sarah Williams. I think most of us saw that one coming when they made the I guess Marissa Mosley stepped down from Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So Sarah Williams leaves, but not only her, Ronnie Porter is out. She just jumped in the portal today. Carter McRae is in the portal, another double-double type player. And then Gracie Gerzich, who is kind of a bench player for Wisconsin, also in the portal. Gracie Merkel from Penn State, probably their best player this past season, is in the portal. Purdue's Madison Layden, who I'll be honest with you, didn't realize she was still on the roster. She's in the portal. I know her sister McKenna played all year, but Madison did not play. She's in the portal. And then Haley Weaver of Northwestern has entered the portal, and Dominique Darius from USC has entered the portal. So that's already 8 out of the Big Ten, 4 of them from the Wisconsin program that is now looking for a new head coach. So that's to be expected. Again, you can enter the portal. You can come back. So that's something to keep an eye on with the Sarah Williams and the Carter McRae and the Ronnie Porter, although On3 is reporting that Carter McRae has already heard from several high-level programs in the ACC, the Big 12, et So not expecting her to return to Wisconsin. But we'll keep you updated as much as we can on the portal. It's going to be flying around as we try to make our way through bracket season. It's at the point, Dalton, where you have to keep one eye on the bracket and one eye on the portal. Coaches certainly do.
That's what I was going to say. That's the wildest part to me is not only are we trying to juggle that, but somebody it matters a lot more to is our coaches. Yeah. And so for them to have to do both of those, it's a constant complaint. And you wonder if at some point we don't get a restructuring in how some of this works because it doesn't make a ton of sense. And look, there's going to be a lot of this in the portal. 2 others I thought I saw, the Reynolds sisters, I think from Purdue.
Oh, yes.
Yep. I want to just put that. And I think Allie Campbell from Penn State also jumped in. I was just checking Twitter to see. But again, there's going to be so many. We're just going to do our best. It's kind of like fishing with a net, and some of them are going to escape through. But it's already ramped up and running.
Was one of those Reynolds sisters the incoming freshman that decommitted from Purdue?
Let me check, because there's so much South Bend, Washington on that Purdue.
Yeah, one of them was the incoming freshman then. Yeah, from South Bend, Washington. She decommitted from Purdue. Yep. So I'll be very curious to see. She and Makalewski, who's coming to Indiana, were the top 2 players in the state, kind of by most people. So I'll be curious to see where the younger of the Reynolds sisters goes. Okay. Let's talk tournament, because that is what people are here for. We'll have plenty of time in the offseason to dive into the portal. We've got 12 teams, which means 12 matchups, technically we don't know two of those matchups. Michigan is going to play the winner of Iowa State and Princeton, and UCLA is going to play the winner of UC San Diego and Southern. I don't think any of us have any concerns about either one of those teams for UCLA on whether or not who they play. But let's jump into it. Do we want to start? Let's start with the 1 seeds, Dalton, and just your thought of their bracket polls. UCLA ends up as the number 1 overall seed. Can I get on my soapbox for a second? And maybe I don't understand this as well as coaches. Maybe there's more to it than I know. I don't get the whole like hoopla over did I get the number 1 overall seed or not. Like, we're hearing that a lot from several of the 1 seed coaches that are not all that thrilled with where they ended up. You're all 1 seeds. Like, I get it in the USC thing. Like, you do have to, UConn is your 2 seed, but it's a 2 seed. There's always going to be somebody good in your bracket. You got to make sure you get through all those games to get there. But I just don't totally understand the whole, like, South Carolina's 2, UCLA's 1. You're both in the geographical regions you wanted to be in. UCLA's in Spokane and South Carolina's in Birmingham. It's not like they sent you the other way. So I don't totally get it, but I'm sure Don Staley's watching this. It's going to be more bulletin board material for this weekend. But
I was going to say, and I've gotten to the same point where I've collectively tuned it all out because, and like in Dawn Staley's argument where she was upset they weren't the number 1 overall seed. Well, they lost to the team that was the number 1 overall seed. I mean, that was a head-to-head game. Do they play different? Whatever kind of arguments you want to make, sure. But to your point, you're still a 1 seed. You're as close as you geographically can be at this point. I thought it really was a lot to do just kind of about nothing. Well, especially too when Dawn said, if that's how this is going to be, we're not going to schedule the same way or schedule as hard anymore. And I was like, well, UCLA played a difficult schedule too. I don't know. I just really was confused by all the rhetoric out there.
I think it's like when the Chiefs won that title and they were all like, this is for all the doubters. And it's like, nobody was doubting you. There was,
or when Georgia won that national championship and they're like, they thought we'd win 4 or 5 games. And it was like, no, you're an NFL team.
I think this is just Dawn Staley trying to light a fire underneath her team. I mean, she knows what she's doing. So, we'll get an up close and personal look at the Gamecocks this weekend, at least in their first game, and hopefully their second. But so UCLA is in the Spokane 1 region. They will get the winner of Richmond, Georgia Tech, again, most likely, assuming that they don't fall the 16 seed. I'm going to make some assumptions about these 1 seeds, that they're not going to lose that opening game. Other teams in their region, you've got the 2 seed NC State, the 3 seed LSU, the 4 seed Baylor are the hosting schools in that Spokane 1. The also dangerous Michigan State Spartans are in that regional as well. They are the 7 seed. They get the matchup with the Harvard Crimson. So that's UCLA's region. USC, I think, did get a much tougher draw in the fact that they have UConn. And I think that's the big one there is like, I'm not like we're splitting hairs between Oklahoma and LSU as 3 seeds and Baylor and Kentucky as 4 seeds. But I think the 2 between NC State and UConn, they probably got the tougher one in UConn, especially since Dalton, that's the team that knocked USC out in the Elite 8 last year. So there's going to be some of that scar tissue there if they do meet up again in the Elite 8. Were there any takeaways for you on these 1 seeds between the Big Ten schools that stands out?
No, but while you have a light bulb in my head, I'll transition it over to. We mentioned just before we got this going, Austin, that there were a couple decisions that we were a little confused by or shocked by. Notre Dame being a 3 seed, as you're analyzing the 2s, that one really shocked me because if you're coming up with a list of 2s you don't want to play, you'd start with UConn, and not far behind would I be putting Notre Dame, and then they end up being a 3.
I think it's a horrible draw for Michigan. The fact that they got bumped up to a 6 and they're like, sweet, we avoided the top 2 seeds, and then they get sent to South Bend. Like, man, that's tough. That's a real tough draw there. But that's Yeah, not a whole lot there. I mean, we'll see. I thought the big takeaway for me was by making it UCLA the 1 and USC the 4, that means, Dalton, that the Final Four, if seeds hold, let's say all the 1 seeds were to advance, we're looking at a 4th matchup of the LA schools and a 4th matchup of South Carolina, Texas. I honestly would have flipped one of them just to avoid that.
Yeah.
I know you can't think that far down the line as a committee, probably, but you have to think man, do we really want our Final Four to be 2 4th matches of the year between conference opponents? And I know Charlie Cream has talked about it. There's only so much you can do when you're getting double-digit schools in from these conferences. Bracket integrity is kind of out the window, but it is interesting that if seeds hold, which rarely do they ever do that in the women's game, maybe more so than the men's. If seeds hold, we're looking at some rematches.
Yeah. No, that's actually, I had noticed the UCLA USC, but my brain was scanning other areas. Didn't even notice the Texas South Carolina potential 4th rematch. That is pretty jarring. But to your point, there's got to be a lot of bracketing principles that maybe we're missing, but it is something that just at face value, you'd say, well, why don't we just trade a region with another one?
Yeah, you would think. I mean, I know that it was tough, on the men's side with 14 SEC teams. There's a chance that Vanderbilt and Alabama play in the second round. That stuff's going to happen at this point.
For sure.
But that was just my number one takeaway. I think if I were rating the pathways between UCLA and USC, I'm probably saying UCLA because the UConn thing is going to be difficult. But my bracket may say otherwise. We'll get to our picks at the end of the show here, but let's talk some interesting. I thought it was interesting, Dalton, and you and I had this similar thought here that Maryland wound up on the 4 line. They will get a regional in College Park, which is huge to not go on the road. I mean, you're looking at 5 seeds like Tennessee, Kansas State, Ole Miss, Alabama. You could have talked me into any of them being host schools. And I would not have. I don't think you could have talked me into Maryland. I don't, especially after the way the Big Ten tournament ended. It was no. I thought they needed to win a couple games in the Big Ten tournament to make a run. And to watch that go the way it did, I was really surprised by them ending up on the 4 line. I know that Ole Miss's head coach, when they showed him live on the show, she did not look thrilled. And she did tweet that she was disappointed but is motivated to get her team. She's disappointed but grateful to be in the tournament, motivated to win some games. But if I was a coach of those teams, I'd be like, Maryland? Really?
Well, and I think that was felt by a lot of people. And look, Austin, you and I both know that net rankings aren't when we start to evaluate and try to seed some of these groups. Ole Miss, to your point, is 11th in the net, and they end up being a 5 seed. Maryland is 28th in the net.
Ooh.
28th in the net.
28. I mean, that's right around the Iowas and the Michigans and the Michigan States of the world.
Michigan State's 21 in the net, and they got a 7 seed.
That's crazy.
And in Michigan's 23rd in the net, Iowa's 24th in the net.
And those are 6 seeds. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It's really kind of confusing and perplexing when you put it that way. Again, understanding that's not end all be all, but I'm confused how they were able to, what metric was used to leapfrog them past 12 teams, a dozen teams to be a host school.
And this wasn't even Maryland's, this wasn't their toughest non-conference schedule they've ever had. They normally scheduled tougher, but they knew with how many new pieces they were going to have this year, they took it a little bit easy. They had to play Texas in that the Martin Luther King Day event.
Yep.
And then they played Duke and then a road game, I think it's Syracuse. But they didn't really test themselves the way they normally do. And I'm thinking about, in the Big Ten, their marquee win is the home game against Ohio State, but you lost at home to Illinois. You lost at home to Nebraska. You got beat pretty badly by UCLA. It's hard to look at that resume and say that's a hosting school.
Agreed.
I mean, What was Maryland's final record? Do you have
Uh,
that in front of you?
I do. If I can refine the region, I get confused. 23-7. They finished
20
23-7.
23-7. Okay. So like I'm just thinking Indiana last year, I think was the last 4 seed
Mhm.
into hosting. And we were sweating that out all the way until selection Sunday. Indiana was 26-6, 15-3 in a much different Big Ten last year.
Sure.
It's hard to compare them apples to apples, but Indiana did have a win over Iowa, who obviously was a big time team that year. They had won at Maryland. They had beaten Michigan State. There were some wins under their belt. I don't know. That one in Notre Dame was a big surprise to me. I think we all kind of thought Ohio State would slide in, and they
Mhm.
did. When you look at those two regions, Ohio State's 5 seed is Tennessee, and Maryland's 5 seed is Alabama. Now they still have to play the smaller seeds in their brackets, Montana State for Ohio State and Norfolk State for Maryland. But when you look at Alabama versus Tennessee, I have some numbers on this, but when you first look at it, Dalton, is there one of those two teams that stands out to you that got a better draw than the other? You've
I don't
seen
know about better.
Alabama.
I have seen Alabama and not a game that Michigan State played, but Tennessee was a part of that same Florida tournament down in West
Okay.
Palm Beach. So I got to see them in person too. And Tennessee plays a fast style. I think a lot of people have been
Yes.
able to have a chance to watch them. They play kind of a chaotic brand,
Yep.
kind of like Ohio State does.
Yep.
Given how inconsistent Ohio State can be at times. Now, granted, when I got to see the Buckeyes in person, I saw an Ohio State team that could cut down nets in the Final Four. Like that team was so good that I got to witness. But we've seen them kind of up and down and give that Big Ten tournament. I mean, they hold on to beat Iowa by 1 point. And in that game against UCLA, it just was never even close. It was one you turned off at halftime
Yep.
because they were so far behind in it. I think Tennessee could really pose some trouble for Ohio State. So I don't know that I love that. I also like this Alabama team a lot. And given what we're talking about with Maryland, where we're not sure that they are maybe truly in the most authentic sense, a real top 16 seed should be a host
Mhm.
school. Both of those really strike me as trouble for both of those teams right now.
So let me start with their opening matchups, and I'll throw the graphics up here. Starting with Ohio
Mhm.
State, they've got Montana State Friday afternoon. We can get into the debate at what is 5:30 afternoon or evening. We could spend it. I usually spend like an inning of baseball talking about that at some point through the season.
That's good baseball
Um,
filler.
yeah, that's a great baseball filler. So Ohio State gets Montana State. I think it's really interesting. Both of these mirror each other, Maryland and Ohio State. So Ohio State gets Montana State, who is an excellent defensive team by the
Mhm.
metrics. They're 27th in the country in points per game allowed. They're 9th in opponent points per play. Obviously, Ohio State scores about 79 points a game. So fascinating matchup between a team in Montana State that wants to slow you down and Ohio State, who's the epitome of wants to speed you up.
Mhm.
Now, Montana State, really good defensively. They get a lot of steals, even more than Ohio State. In fact, Montana State is leading the country in steals per game at 14. Now, keep in mind, there's some teams in Montana State's conference that probably cough the ball up a little bit more than in
Sure.
Power Five conference play, but um, they force 23 turnovers a game. They get 14 steals a game. The weakness for Montana State is they give up a lot of threes, but Ohio State doesn't really seek that out. So
Right.
I'll be interested to see if this is any sort of like a bruiser for Ohio State. Kind of one of those like kind of got to grind it out. Like some 13 seeds, it's if they play your style, you can kind of blow them out. But this is contrasting styles, which is going to be very fascinating to watch. And very similarly for Maryland, who will have Norfolk State on Saturday afternoon in the first round. Norfolk State is 16th nationally in points per game at 56 allowed. Maryland scores 80. So another fascinating matchup. Norfolk is top 15 in the country in opponent field goal percentage, while Maryland is top 15 in the country in field goal percentage. This is a Norfolk State team that again gets 13 steals a game, 5.5 blocks a game, both top 15 in the country. They force 21 turnovers a game. So I'm absolutely fascinated to watch how Maryland and Ohio State handle potential rock fights in
Yeah.
the opening round. And then the similarities continue where Ohio State then gets Tennessee, who wants to run. And that is going to be so different from Montana State. Tennessee averages 87 a game. They're second in the country in possessions per 40 minutes. They're going to get up and down the floor. They get a lot of offensive rebounds. They're active defensively. And for Maryland, they play Alabama, who's top 20 in the country in points per game. They give up a ton of points, both Alabama and Maryland do. And they're both efficient shooting teams. So I think it's going to be really interesting. Sometimes those teams that just play you and try to make it a game to 70 in the NCAA tournament are the most just annoying pests. And I'm just fascinated the fact that not only did both Maryland and Ohio State get drawn against one, they both then have a totally different matchup 2 days after it if they're able to win.
And again, you hinted at the fact, or not even hinted, but you just brought it up that how well Norfolk State and Montana State rank in terms of steals per game defensively. It's a group that doesn't necessarily play the conservative style. And I think that's where a lot of times in these high versus low seed matchups, the high seed really can take advantage, right? Because they're that much more athletic, they're that much quicker. But with these teams kind of playing that brand of basketball as well, I'm with you. I think these both have capabilities of being kind of drugged through mud. I think these are going to be two of the ones to really pay attention to in the first round.
Yeah, I am fascinated by it. And we know we've watched Ohio State and Maryland a lot this year that when they can play fast and they can
Yep.
be disruptive and they want to do that, but they can also both almost play too fast at
Mhm.
times. And so matchups with Alabama and Tennessee, respectively, could be interesting. Do they get too sped up against a team like that? I think it's interesting because we talked about Alabama. They average 78.5 points a game. Maryland's giving up 69 points a game, almost 70 a game. And we saw that late in the year. They gave up a ton in that overtime win over Ohio State. I think that was in the 90s. And then they gave up 90 plus to Michigan in the Big Ten tournament. So interesting to see how they can potentially slow down Alabama. But fascinated by those matchups. And again, Ohio State has the other aspect of this, Dalton, which is they lost on their home floor last year. They
Mhm.
were a 2 seed and lost to the 7 seed Duke. So they can play both ways. I watched it last year with Indiana. We, of course, lost 2 years ago as a 1 seed. And then last year they host again. And all reporters want to ask is, what's your mentality going into this? Like, you lost at home last year. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it, but it's
Right.
there. And so it can either be motivation, which I think it served as for Indiana, as like, no, we're not losing on our home floor 2 years in a row. But there's also scar tissue and those mental hurdles you got to jump through that comes with it. And I'm fascinated by Ohio State being thrown back into the fire in a tougher matchup than last year and having to try and defend home floor.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And it's funny because every program to some extent has that, right? Where they have a past experience that can either be motivation or scar tissue, but that one seems pretty in the face and pretty evident for Ohio State that they're in that situation again. And honestly, I mean, you talk about the 2-7 matchup that it was that Duke came in. This Tennessee team, I don't know if I would say they're one of the very best in the country. I mean, I think there's a reason they're a 5 seed and they're certainly a really great team, but they have been one of the most fun teams to watch all year because of that style we talk about. I mean, they're a real threat to go to Ohio State and knock off the Buckeyes.
Well, we've talked a lot about Ohio State's rebounding issues this year. Tennessee, if they get to that matchup, will absolutely test it because they are 13th in the country in offensive rebound rate, 21st in the country in total rebounds per game. Ohio State allows 11 offensive rebounds a game to their opponents, and they're outside the top 250 in the country in opponent rebounds per game.
Yeah.
So they are not a good rebounding team statistically. So it'll be fascinating to watch how that goes. The other
Agreed.
thing is, though, that Tennessee has been putrid this year defending inside the arc.
Uh,
Opponents are shooting over 50% from 2-pointers against Tennessee and 44% in total against Tennessee, which is 321st in the country. And Ohio State shoots it at 50% inside the arc. That's where they want to go. They don't want to shoot threes. So we talked about how Montana State does a good job of not allowing threes. Tennessee does a really bad job inside the arc. So can Ohio State exploit that? That feels like the avenue to a win for the Buckeyes. For Maryland, when you're looking at where they might be able to exploit Alabama does give up they give up a decent amount of points coming from the free throw line. Maryland does a really good job of getting to the free throw line. That's something that they've always done under Brenda Freeze. So can they do that? And I always circle teams like Alabama, 68% from the free throw line this year. That kind of stuff is going to matter in the NCAA tournament if you can't make free throws. So keep that one circled. Let's generally here, 6 through 11 seeds. There's a lot of them in this conference.
Yep.
When you see the route that these teams got to potentially pulling some upsets on the road, did anybody stand out to you when you saw the bracket and you said, oh, that team's got a nice little route there? And did anybody stand out to you? I already said Michigan, but did anybody stand out to you as like, oh boy, that's not a good spot?
Well, I think for the good spots or the best possible spots in that seed range, I think Iowa getting to play Murray State in game 1 and then possibly playing Oklahoma or Florida Gulf Coast there in Norman. Obviously, none of these are going to be easy, right?
Nope.
Like you're the underdogs wherever you're going if you're in the seed range. But I think that's a possible route. Look, paint me as a homer. I get it. It's fine. But I think Michigan State as a 7, they play Harvard. I'm really curious about your take on that game. We could talk about that in a little bit.
I have
since
takes.
You've seen both teams. Yeah,
I have takes.
I need Austin takes. I need a render. But NC State as the 2. I think NC State's been playing really well as of late, but when you looked at that 2 seed, you said UConn and Notre Dame were the 2 you didn't want to play, and Notre Dame ends up being a 3, and it's not UConn. So again, given the fact that you're going to be an underdog, it's not the worst that you could have asked for, if that makes any sense. I thought bad spots. The obvious one was your squad, Indiana, in Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah, I think anybody who gets sent to Columbia is in a tough spot.
It feels like a death march. Like we did it last year, and you just kind of walk over there, and you're like, it'd be great to, in our case last year, beat North Carolina and get the chance, but it's.
Well, when we got them, we were in their regional for the Sweet 16. So we I kind of looked at it last year of, okay, great, let's get out of our home regional. Let's kind of get that monkey off our back. But then it kind of feels like you have an expiration date on the season.
Yeah.
And give Indiana credit, they nearly won that game. But it's going to be even more difficult now that it's in Columbia and their home court. And you don't have Mackenzie Holmes, you don't have Sarah Sky, who neither one of them had a great game last year, but it's still the eyeballs that go to them that allows a Sydney Parrish to have, I think she had 21 or 22 in that game. So yeah, I'm with you. It was it was not great.
It's not a fun one to see pop up. The other one I'd say for not best spots, and again, maybe this just with Michigan State being kind of in my background or whatever, and down the road, but Michigan drawing South Bend, Indiana. I mean, we've been giving a lot of praise to Notre Dame. I thought they were a 2 seed. They end up being a 3. Michigan's got ahead there, but maybe even before that game, if Iowa State beats Princeton, we're talking about. Yeah, we're talking about a Michigan team that plays 5 guards, and they might have to go against one of the most prolific, dominant interior forces in all of college basketball, and Audie Crooks at Iowa State. If that happens, like that to me, I mean, we keep talking about fascinating matchups, and I think there's a lot of them. I kept staring at that one when it got released, and I'm like, maybe it'd be better to be a 7 in that case. I don't know.
Well, and I think we had been talking on the pod, like, can you jump to 6? Can you jump to 6? Then you get the more favorable run, and then they jump to 6 and get Notre Dame. And now, like you said, it's going to be interesting because I agree with you, but also Kim Barnes-Arico has been doing this for a year now.
Yeah.
Like, it's a whole season of we're playing 5 guards and we'll figure it out. and they've figured it out. And they usually have a really good way of, yeah, we got to deal with Audie Crooks on one side, but we're going to make sure that she has difficulty defending Greta Kampschrader on the other
Out
side.
on the perimeter.
So they can turn it on you real quickly. That'll be fascinating. That matchup will be Friday morning. It's the first game of the tournament. So we will get Wednesday evening Iowa State against Princeton. And then Friday morning in South Bend, Indiana, you want some early basketball on the West Coast, you can wake up at 8:30 a.m. and watch Michigan against either Princeton or Iowa State. That will be fascinating to watch, like you said, that matchup between Audie Crooks potentially and the very small Michigan team. I'll say this. I think there was an advantage to falling to the 10. And Charlie Cream said that when he was on our show in February, because I look at Oregon and I look at Nebraska. Now, I'm not super high on either team. I'd say I'm higher on Nebraska than I am on Oregon. I don't think Oregon's bringing a lot of great vibes into this tournament.
Sure.
But, I mean, I was watching the bracket for the last week or so, and the whole week, Charlie Cream had Indiana as the 10 seed in the Fort Worth Regional. And I'm not saying that winning at TCU is easy, but I'd much rather be there than Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, okay, this is a solid spot. And Indiana getting bumped up to the 9 is honestly a bad draw as opposed to staying down at the 10. So essentially, had Indiana lost to Oregon, they could have been the 10. Oregon could have been the 9. I wonder if Indiana playing USC tight again was a difference maker that bumped them up. I don't know. But I like Nebraska's draw a lot. Playing a Louisville team that when you look statistically doesn't have really anything that stands out to you. And then they get TCU, which, again, TCU is a really good team. Haley Van Lith is awesome.
You're going to be an underdog in all this.
But you're talking about an atmosphere at TCU. I don't think they're known for their women's basketball atmosphere. That's another part of this. You got to go to Storrs, Connecticut. You got to go to South Bend, Indiana. You got to go to Columbia, South Carolina. These are places that are going to have a rocking atmosphere. I don't know what Fort Worth will look like for a women's basketball regional. I'm not even sure the folks in Fort Worth know what it's going to look like. So it could be rocking and a total home court advantage and packed to the rafters. It could also be like, okay, and maybe you can go in there and shock the world. I don't like Nebraska, again, is a team that is equipped to, what if they catch fire? Like, what if Nebraska just gets red hot? And we saw it a little bit in the Big Ten tournament, and we've seen it. We saw it at Maryland when they went on the road and won there. Like, what if you just get hot? And Louisville has struggled this season defending the three-point line, giving up 33% to their opponents. They're not good defensively in most categories. So can Nebraska take advantage of that and potentially go after a Louisville team that, again, they're pretty good on the offensive glass, but that's about the only thing when I looked at the statistic profiles between the two that really stands out to me about Louisville. So could Nebraska go and win a game or two? Absolutely. I think that's a great draw for the Cornhuskers. And then conversely for Oregon, Vanderbilt, they've got the really talented freshman.
Michaela Blakes.
Yep, Michaela Blakes. And you got to deal with that, which is easier said than done, certainly. But the big thing for Oregon is they're a great defensive team. Vanderbilt is a great offensive team. But what has Oregon struggled with the last probably month of the season is that great defense. They have lost it. And Kelly Graves was talking about it post-game at the Big Ten tournament about how he's like, I don't totally get like why we're not playing harder. And this is obviously paraphrased, but something along the lines of like he's looking for the team to give a little bit more like they were in January when they were beating Indiana. They went to Michigan State and won. They beat Iowa, and they were rolling, and they've lost that edge. And if they don't have that edge against Vandy, they average almost 84 a game. So that could be an issue for Oregon. Again, I'm much higher on Nebraska just as a team than Oregon, but I like the 10 seed route as opposed to Indiana and Illinois, who are now stuck in the 8-9 game.
Completely agreed. And I'm with you. I mean, Vanderbilt's another team I had a chance to see in person out in Palm Springs, California this year when they played Michigan State. Michaela Blake's wasn't even all the way Michaela Blake's back at that point, but you could see the firepower that they had. Oregon, I mean, we talked about earlier some of the lower seeds that want to kind of make things into a rock fight. I mean, Oregon did that all Big Ten season.
Yeah.
And I think I saw them at their best at it when they came to East Lansing, but it has declined a steady amount. And look, Philly Che played against Michigan State almost that entire game. And there have been many more instances where she's been put off the floor in certain other matchups in the last month. And you kind of wonder if that leads to any of the other stuff. But I'm with you. And matter of fact, after you bring it up and you kind of reconsider, for what Nebraska could ask for, that's as good, I think, as Nebraska could get. So I completely agree. I think if you were a 6, 7, or 10 potential seed, you're looking at those 2s and 3s, and you want to either be in maybe Norman or Fort Worth. Again, none of them are easy. Not saying that.
Yeah.
But like if you've got to pick, I kind of think those are the spots you'd want to go, and Nebraska found themselves in one.
Yeah, all Big Ten schools missed Stores, so that's
Yeah.
helpful. I don't think anybody wanted to go to Stores, Connecticut on Paige Becker's final ride through the NCAA tournament. And so yeah, I think there's a favorable aspect to this thing for Nebraska. Let's do your Spartans, because you wanted to hear my takes on Michigan State, Harvard. I have seen both these teams. Now, I will be honest with you. There was a point in the year where I started to just block out the Harvard game because that was not our best performance. We turned the ball over 27 times in that game. But when I was diving into the stat profile here, this was one I circled immediately and said, I cannot wait to see this game. I don't think you could put two more different teams together in an NCAA tournament matchup and how they want to win the game than these two right here. So this is just what I found. Then I'll let you talk about your Spartans.
Sure.
This is a Harvard team that's fourth nationally in opponent points per game at under 53. They hold opponents to 37% shooting, 27.5% from the three-point line. And look, I can vouch for that. Indiana had nothing going offensively in that game against Harvard. They are a very slow-paced team. They do not want to get up and down the floor a whole lot. They don't turn the ball over. They force 20 turnovers a game. On the flip side, Michigan State, they want to get up and down the floor. They're 13th in the country in possessions per 40 minutes, while Harvard is 316th. So one team wants to go, one team wants to sit. Michigan State averages almost 80 points a game. Harvard gives up 52. Michigan State shoots it at 45% from the floor. That's 8% better than what Harvard gives up. So, and then Michigan State, they live on your turnovers. 22 turnovers a game forced. Harvard only turns it over 12 times a game, which is 15th best in the country. I am absolutely enthralled by the statistic breakdown of this game. And I'm so curious to see which pace will win out, because I think that's going to really determine who wins this game.
No, I think that's a fair point. And in reading up on Harvard quite a bit, and of course, again, you got to see them, but Harmony Turner is
awesome.
The motor that makes it all run for Harvard. The Crimson only have two players that score double figures on a nightly average, and Turner's averaging 23 points a game, leads them in rebounds, assists, steals, everything. I mean, she is a dynamite player. I think all of that, to what you said when it comes to tempo, pace, all of that is going to be really, really fascinating. See if Michigan State can speed that group up. I mean, and in times where Michigan State struggled, it's because they've lost the tempo battle, right? I mean, you go back to that Oregon loss, you go to a couple of those moments, that it all really interests me. And it also interests me for your perspective on it, because again, Indiana was the only ranked team Harvard played all season. Indiana was ranked 25 when that game happened at
What a different world that feels like. Not that it's been a fine season. It's just like that was the only week of the entire year that Indiana was ranked. What a time for Harvard to grab them.
You're right, right. And so like some of that really interests me too, because you go through and you imagine you kind of get baptized by fire if you're a group like Michigan State and you go through the trenches that is the Big Ten season this year. Now
Hmm.
the Ivy League, though, not to poo-poo it, because they got 3 teams
Yep.
into the dance this year.
Yep.
So I'm not saying it's not a tough league, but it's not the same as the Big Ten. I'm curious if there's any aspects of that plays in. But I will point this out for a bunch of the fans and listeners. There's a really fun storyline to kind of dive into here. Robin Freilich, of course, is in her second season leading Michigan State. Carrie Moore's in her third season leading Harvard. Carrie Moore played at Western Michigan. She was the country's leading scorer there at like 25 points a game. The GA and director of ops on that Western Michigan staff was Robin Freilich. So
Ah,
Robin Freilich was a part of the coaching group that led Carrie Moore at Western Michigan, and now they battle each other. That's going to be a fun storyline. But in terms of the game, I got to completely agree with you, Austin. I think it's going to be fascinating to watch the different styles.
Carrie Moore is a really, really good coach. Really good. And she's going to, if she wants to, there's a lot of these Ivy League coaches at Princeton and Columbia, now Harvard. They can use these jobs if they want to get bigger jobs because
Yeah.
Carrie Moore, I thought she coached a really good game against Indiana, kept running great sets. Their set for the game-winning three-pointer was magnificent.
Oh,
Little
I
fake
remember that
post
now.
screen,
Yep.
just had Indiana running around and following a person who wasn't even there. If you want to go back and watch that, I wouldn't if you're an IU fan. But if you want to go watch, and if you're a Michigan State fan, see that set. Watch the end of that Indiana Harvard game in overtime. They ran a gorgeous set to get an open three. Uh, so we'll see. I'm fascinated by it, and so I was going to ask you, like, when is a game this year? Is there a game that Michigan State didn't win the pace battle, but they were able to kind of grind out a win? When you think back through the Michigan State season, is that because like people ask me, like, obviously the thing with Indiana is they got to make threes. And when they don't
Hmm.
make threes, when have they won games? And for me, it's like back in the Bahamas, Indiana kind of grinded out some games where they didn't have their 3-point shot. Are there games this year where Michigan State has had to win rock fights and they've successfully done it?
I would say there are. I actually just pulled up a schedule next to me because I try to be prepared. It's all crinkled, which goes to counter my point. But
Everything's
um,
crinkled at this point.
I mistook it for a bracket that I filled out and got angry with. No,
I got brackets everywhere. They're all over the house.
but I was taking a look at this. It's interesting because I'd say Michigan State has grinded out some wins. I wouldn't say all of them have been by pace. Minnesota was a game they had to grind out. That one
Yeah.
was a little bit with pace. Indiana, that was grinded out for a while before the Spartans pulled away, it felt like. But that wasn't so much to do with pace as it was for
Hmm.
Minnesota. At Northwestern, Michigan State couldn't get their pace going, and they had to fight with Northwestern for a while. But the big one to point to, as I'm staring at this here, Austin, is when Iowa came back in December. That was a 68-66 finish, if I
Yeah.
recall right.
Yeah.
And that game, Michigan State didn't get to play its style of ball, but they just found ways. They made plays. Nyla Hampton, I think, had 13 points in that game, if memory serves right, and all 13 were in the fourth quarter. I mean, they just made plays and found a way. But there are examples of it, but a lot of times they're winning the pace. I think that's why there's so few examples to point to here.
Yeah, and I would have said the Indiana one would have been on that
Yeah.
list because it didn't feel like that was a back and forth, let's get up and down game. Now, Michigan State got some buckets from some steals, but it didn't feel like it was a fast paced game. Indiana did its best to slow it
Yeah.
down.
And my memory of it is everybody just missing 100 shots.
Well,
Like that game, there just were 100 missed
awful,
shots combined.
awful 3-point shooting in that game. So that's Saturday afternoon. Really excited for that one. Here's
Yep.
one, and I know you mentioned you liked Iowa's path, and I think compared
Yep.
to other teams, it's good. I saw this Murray State team last year. They came to Bloomington, and look, they're the racers by name. They're the racers by style. This is the fastest team in America. They play the fastest tempo of anybody in the country. They lead the country in points per game at almost 88, and they're seventh in possessions per 40 minutes. When we played them, Gosh, I got the schedule up actually from last year. Let me get this final score. 112-79 was the final score of Indiana Murray State last year.
Oh, wow.
I know Coach Morin was frustrated with the defense, but when you looked back at it, you're like, gosh, that Murray State team, they just run and they just shoot it. And they're basically like, essentially from what I got from last year was they're going to shoot it quick because that means they're going to get more possessions. And so they want to get up and down the floor, which I would say in the past would be Iowa. I don't think that's this year's Iowa team. This year's Iowa team is not built to be super up and down the floor. They're built more to dig their heels in defensively and hope that they can kind of grind something out. It's interesting to me, some of the comparisons in this, because Iowa is middle of the pack in the country, 182nd in opponent points per game. They are not very good at the three-point line. They give up 35% of their opponent points from beyond the arc. They also have a 34% three-point rate for their opponents, which is 320th in the country. So Murray State wants to take them. They're going to take 38% of their possessions are going to be three-pointers. That's just what they do. Now, they're not good defensively. Murray State, very bad statistically on the defensive side of the floor. They give up a high percentage from every aspect. They give up 72 points a game. But again, they're just trying to outscore you. That's simply what the Racers are trying to do. And again, stylistically, it's fascinating because I think if it were last year's Iowa Hawkeyes, you can't outrun Iowa.
Right.
But this year you can. And Iowa, if you hark back to when they were struggling this year, which does feel like a while ago, when they were struggling, they were turning the ball over a ton. Turning the ball over 30 times against Tennessee. So can Murray State speed Iowa up? Maybe the defense isn't great for the Racers, but can they force some turnovers? Can they make Iowa play from behind and feel a little bit more rushed in this game? If Iowa can get past Murray State, then yes, I like the draw in terms of like, are you playing a winnable game against Oklahoma? Sure. Is that a place that Iowa fans can flock to? Yes, absolutely. But this one is so fascinating because I've watched this Murray State team last year, and it's a ping pong game. They're going up and down the floor. They don't really care about defense because they're going to just try and outscore you, and it's going to be interesting to see how Iowa matches up with that.
Well, that's interesting to me, and I'm glad we spun back to it because really, when we were doing paths, I was analyzing a potential second round matchup with Oklahoma, and kind of as you talk about, I think that's one of the better spots maybe you could find if you're going to have to play a 2 or a 3 or whatever. But I did not know that about Murray State. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't seen them play this year. So when you pose and present it as that's how fast they want to play, because you're right. We've seen Iowa struggle with Tennessee. We've seen Iowa struggle with Michigan State's pressure too this season. Ohio State. Honestly, if Michigan State didn't have 25, 26 turnovers that they kind of just shot themselves in the foot with in the Big Ten tournament, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe that game could be a little bit different. But they do struggle with pressure and they don't want to play. Clark doesn't just get the rebound and race down the floor and chuck up a 40-footer anymore.
Yeah.
Like they're very much in a different day and age where they run and use just about all the shot clock in those half-court possessions. That's really a fascinating matchup. There's a lot of interesting styles in these matchups. I don't know if we normally get this many interesting and contradictory styles to this extreme in the first round.
Oh, that's what I'm fascinated about. And then the Oklahoma matchup. Oklahoma's a really good team. Like the Big 12. I guess they're not Big 12 anymore. That's a slip there. But we do this podcast, so we're so focused on the Big 10 that some of these non-conference teams are blind spots. But I mean, Oklahoma averages 85 points a game. Actually, they are the fastest team in the country. 81 possessions per 40 minutes is first in the country.
Wow.
So this
Maybe
actually
that doesn't work well for Iowa either.
This could be a decent tune-up for Iowa. If they're able to beat Murray State with the pressure they're going to present, then they're just going to get it again.
Yeah.
It's different than the Ohio State, Maryland paths where they're going to play these rock fights and then go play a team that wants to turn into a track meet. Iowa's going to get 2 track meets. So I think that could play to Iowa's advantage. But
That's fair.
Oklahoma does such a good job. They share the ball. They lead the country with 22 assists a game. They have 14 and a half offensive rebounds a game. They're second to the country in total rebounds and defensive rebounds per game. They turn the ball over a ton, though. So that's where Iowa could take advantage of that is, hey, they give you a turnover, go down and kill some clock, make a shot. They give you a turnover, go down, kill some clock. Like, it'll be interesting to see if Jan Jansen wants her team to run with both Murray State and Oklahoma, or if she does simply go high school Indiana style, suck the clock down, sit on the ball, and try and limit the possessions of both of these teams. Let's keep moving. Thursday, first game, Washington and Columbia. I saw Columbia in the Bahamas. Again, feels like forever ago. It feels like a whole different lifetime
How
ago.
many Ivy League teams did you cover this year?
3. We played Brown, and then we played Harvard, then we played Columbia.
Wow,
And
okay.
we've played Princeton with, what's their coach's name? Berube. They were in our regional back in 2022. So I've seen just about everybody in the Ivy League over the past.
I saw Yale this year, but they are not in the field.
Yale is Yale's struggling right now. Columbia's not. This is a good team. It's rare that a team like the Ivy or a conference like the Ivy League gets 3 teams in. So kudos to the Ivy League for that. Glad to see Washington got in. I think we expected it. I think we also expected them to be in the first 4. So I did a small dive into this one of things at Columbia. So this is another team I circle as yikes. 62% free throw shooting for Columbia.
Ooh.
Could Washington just play like a hack a lion all game and just kind of make their way through it? They do a really good job, though, defensively of not putting you on the free throw line. They're a excellent rebounding team. They are 4th in the country with over 16 offensive rebounds a game. Wow. That's pretty wild for a team that I don't remember having a ton of huge size to it, but I do remember it being a big deal, like that we won the rebounding battle that day. Like that was a huge point of emphasis that Terry Morin put on that game. So in Washington, not a big team outside of Delia Daniels. Right. She's a great rebounder, great player, but they have a lot of small guards. So their guards are going to have to get involved. I still stand by that El Ladine is the type of like Kemba Walker candidate that could just get red hot and take Washington through a game or 2. Yep. But they're going to need more than her.
How many times do you see a team maybe have 2 of those? Because I'd contend that Savia Sellers could be that kind of player too. So like you got 2 just bucket potential makers.
Was it the Shabazz Napier and Boatwright? Were they on the same team?
Yeah,
for
I think so, right?
Yeah. I mean, those 2 were studs. Savia Sellers can absolutely fill it up, and they're going to need somebody else to do it. You know, you're going to get something good from Daniels. She's been really consistent. You feel pretty good about Ladine. Can you get Sellers and or Steins to give you something? Because the bench for Washington has kind of been a non-factor for most of the year. So a lot is on their starters to contribute. So can they get something double figures out of Steins? Can they get 12 to 15 points with 3 or 4 threes from Sellers? That's the kind of stuff that's going to change it for Washington. But Columbia, a sneaky good team that people probably haven't watched much of this year. But that's a good Columbia team, and I'm excited about that one. What have we not talked about yet? Illinois Creighton.
Yep.
The Illini, they get a Saturday night game in Austin, Texas. I think for Illinois, there's a little bit of a different vibe here. So, and and I'm not in a bad way. So you're obviously thinking, man, we're in a 1-seed region. That's tough. But I think it's been over 2 decades since Illinois has won an NCAA tournament game. I believe our friend Mike Kuhn, I think it was 2000 maybe the last time, something around then. So for Illinois, the emphasis is on this game right here. And can they show that next step as a program? Were they in the first 4 2 years ago, I believe, when they made the tournament in 23? I believe they were in the first 4 and they lost. I know Purdue lost to St. John. I can't remember. I can't keep them all in track, but this is a big one for I think Shauna Green and because there's a few things with this. Number one, this is going to be the last time that they put this team together. You're
No.
losing a real big chunk of players from this Illinois team. Kendall Bostic, Genesis Bryant, likely Makaira Cook, who hasn't played, obviously, for most of the season, Adalia McKenzie. So this is a group that is playing together probably for the final time.
Right.
Can they come together and do something that the program hasn't done in a long time? And yes, confirming they did play in the first four. They lost to Mississippi State that year.
I just had pulled that up. I was going to tell you. Yeah. So there's that. And then also, you nailed it. 2000 is the last year
2000.
Illinois has won a game in the NCAA tournament.
I think this has a lot of importance for Illinois. I think a team like Indiana, who's been to the Sweet 16 3 of the last 4 years, is thinking about getting to the Sweet 16 and how being a 9 seed made that more difficult. I think a team like Illinois is probably angled toward, what do we need to do to beat Creighton? What do we need to do to have this recruiting pitch of, hey, we're not only in the tournament 2 of the last 3 years, we won an NCAA tournament game. And I think that's kind of where the eyeballs are at for Illinois. Looking at this matchup with Creighton, a great three-point shooting team. Blue Jays shoot it at 37%. They take about 38% of their shots from three. They get 38% of their points from three-pointers. Illinois has been pretty good this season in three-point defense. There's a couple similarities between these two teams. These are actually very similar teams. Both of them keep their opponents off the free throw line. Neither team fouls much at all. It's one of the big reasons Illinois has been able to get to this point with 6 people is that they don't get in foul trouble. And somehow all these players stay on the floor. So that's a big thing. Neither team puts the opponent at the free throw line. Neither team turns the ball over. Creighton's one of the best in the country. 11.5 turnovers a game for Creighton, a 1.51 assist to turnover ratio. That's bonkers. Illinois, 1.18 assist to turnover ratio, and they only turn the ball over 12.5 turnovers per game. And neither team forces any turnovers. They're both toward the bottom of the country in forced turnovers. So I expect this to be kind of a well-played basketball game with limited turnovers, with limited free throws. But I do expect it to be kind of ugly in the sense that, like, we could see a low-scoring game. Both teams are really good cleaning up the defensive glass. They both allow 9 offensive rebounds per game or less. So again, I just expect this to be a really solid defensive game. Minimal free throws, minimal turnovers, minimal second chance opportunities. Which team's going to shoot better? They're both great three-point shooting teams. Illinois really turned it on down the stretch of the season. I think it's just going to be, this could be a shooting contest. Trying to break out of a rock fight between these two.
Well, and Creighton's a team, if we go to personal witness experiences, last year I saw it in Cancun. Michigan State played against them in Cancun, and they got quite a bit of that squad back. I was looking at the stats and saw Lauren Jensen's name pop up, and it was kind of just flashbacks in my head. You hear the helicopter chopper going in the background of PTSD of how good they were. They were a group where you watched, and in the first game before we even played them, you sat there and you're like, they could show up to a local YMCA and just run the league.
Yeah.
Not in any kind of way of like diminishing, like they're a really good, talented team. What I mean by that is they're that kind of fundamental and play that kind of old school basketball, and they do it unbelievably effectively. So that's going to be an interesting one because Austin, you and I both have said, and maybe if there's a team that could possibly have used us last week, maybe the most, it might be Illinois, just to rest the legs a little bit for a squad that has been so depleted. But nonetheless, that should be a fun game because Creighton's a team that aesthetically is just a lot of fun to watch play the game, just an old school kind of brand.
Yeah, they're both going to play a really good style of basketball. And I thought Creighton was a little underseeded. They were a ranked team there for the end of the season. So a little surprised they slid down to the 9. That will be a fun matchup. I know we talked a little bit about Indiana. We haven't really talked about the matchup with Utah. And this is going to be, if you want to see a shooting contest, Dalton, and you want to see a 3-point barrage, Friday at 1:30, I would highly recommend you watch this game because you are not going to see two teams put the ball up in the air more than these two are. They're going to go back and forth. They're going to shoot the three ball a ton. Utah takes 40% of their shots from the 3-point line.
Wow.
Indiana's 34. I've always
Yeah.
thought, man, Indiana really relies on the 3-point line. I had not seen Utah. Utah had not been shown to me until this week, and I've now seen what it looks like to really depend on the 3-point line. So this is a fascinating matchup of two teams that A, shoot the ball a ton, and B, aren't exceptional defending the 3-point line. Utah is really bad statistically. Again, I these are all framed in statistics. I get it. You can defy statistics whenever you want, but Indiana is pretty average, 211th in 3-point defense this season. Utah is 292nd in defending the 3-point line, 254th in opponent 3-point rate. So they give up a lot of threes. They give up a lot of 3-point looks, but they're going to take a ton. They're just going to come down and they're going to shoot it. And they're paced by a junior in Gianna Neepkins. She averages 19 a game, has had 16 games this season with at least 3-pointers made. She's hit 244 over her Utah career. Her teammate Kennedy McQueen has hit 264 over her career. That is bonkers. It is two people with almost 250 3-point makes in their careers.
That's insane.
Like Yarden just set the program record at 208. And we got people in the 250s and 260s here.
That's crazy.
Can't wait to see the matchup here. But again, I think it's going to be a lot of 3-point shots. If you're looking for like non-3-pointer related stuff that might decide this game, these are two teams that do not rebound the basketball all that well. So, and they're both really good at keeping the others off the offensive glass. So that'll be an interesting matchup. Which team can maybe generate some second chance looks? Because as we know, when you watch the game of basketball, second chance 3-pointers never miss.
No, it feels like that. That's a real
thing. If you get an offensive rebound and you kick it out and there's an open 3, it's going in. You could just count it. So look for potentially second chance points to make a big difference in this game. That's pretty much everybody. We touched on the 1 seeds. Again, just flashing their matchups up. It'll be UNC Greensboro for USC Saturday afternoon. And then for UCLA, it's to be determined between UC San Diego and Southern. That's Friday night. I believe that's the last game of the night on Friday. Have you filled out your bracket yet, Dalton?
I have. I rushed through it last night. This is still pending review. I still need to take a look and maybe.
That's fair. But review is allowed. Let me pull up my tournament app here. But just basically going off of what we have seen thus far, what is your bold upset pick that you have picked in the opening round? Do you have one?
Oh, let me take a look again. Why don't you start while I take a look?
Yep, I'll start. Let me pull up my women's bracket here. I like, so bias wise, I'm rooting for Chirp for the Ball State Cardinals there in that 12-5. I don't honestly know much about Ball State. I know they've had a great year. That'd be a fun one. In terms of what I actually have picked on my bracket as I scroll through, I like Washington over West Virginia. I think if Washington can get through, there's something to be said about winning that first game like we see in conference tournaments where you have a win under your belt and you're playing a team that hasn't played in 2 weeks in West Virginia. I think that could be advantageous to Washington or Columbia, whoever wins that game. And they will have a game under their belt on that floor and could be a potential opportunity for them to pull an upset. That's really about all I have. I have a 10-7 upset with South Dakota State over Oklahoma State. I think the Jackrabbits have had a terrific season. I can't give you much analysis on them, but that's just my gut there. But for the most part, I've gone pretty chalky in the first round. Looking at teams that I see I could see, like I said, I'm rooting for Ball State, but I like Ole Miss getting out of the Baylor region. I think that they're going to be motivated. Their coach seemed genuinely disappointed that they're not hosting. Baylor came out of Virginia Tech's regional last year. Would not be surprised if they're a little susceptible on their home floor. Tennessee at Ohio State, I actually have, and I know, sorry, Buckeye fans, but
I know.
I just
So I
don't
can
know.
tell you what I got here too. I also did Tennessee. I also did Bama over
Yeah,
the
you could
Maryland
talk me
regional.
into Bama too. Yeah.
I did do Ole Miss over Baylor. I don't have too many upsets, especially in that first weekend. But the one I did, and this might just be working with my heart, I did put MSU to the Sweet 16. So I got them
Okay.
beating
Yep.
NC
I
State.
like
So
that.
that's something not chalk. It's what I got not
Yeah.
chalk to offer you. So
Absolutely. I did not. I will be honest. I did not go that far with my Hoosiers. A bit of a gauntlet in front of them,
yeah.
winning at South Carolina. But I do like. There's part of me that I see both Maryland and Ohio State losing, but then I
Mhm.
kind of take a step back and I say, and it's the same reason I'm not. And we'll get to our champion, and the same reason in my thought process about the champion. I have watched so much Big Ten basketball this year that I know all the flaws of these teams.
That's fair.
I have seen Maryland and Ohio State at their worst. I know what plagues them. Alabama and Tennessee are almost like fresh, like, oh, yeah, these teams are fun. Look at how good they
Yeah.
are. We
Yeah.
haven't watched the ebbs and flows of their seasons to know their flaws. So that's why I'm like balancing, like, yeah, I've watched Maryland really struggle here recently, and I could easily see them losing to Alabama, but maybe I just haven't seen enough Alabama either.
No.
And that's my same thing with the national champion. I don't know who you have as your national title winner.
You want me to go first?
Go ahead.
So I did do all chalk to the Final Four. And this is not sexy at all. I get it. I really just kind of was
Did you
like,
take all one
again,
seeds?
this is for review. All one seeds to the Final Four.
Okay.
I honestly, I feel that they're that strong of teams. Actually, I didn't. I got to take a look. I think I actually put Notre Dame in the Final Four out of the Texas region.
I think I
Um,
did too.
yeah,
Yep.
just because I just didn't want all one. I went back and just had to take A1 out. But I've made USC my national champion. You could talk me into others as well, and USC meaning Southern Cal, not South Carolina. But I made Juju Watkins and USC my national champ. You could talk me into others. You could talk me out of USC, but I really was impressed with how they handled UCLA in those two regular season matchups, not taking as much stock into the Big Ten tournament. And I just felt that if I had to pick one as of now, for whatever reason, my gut went that way.
I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair. This was one of my concerns from the Big Ten tournament, though.
Mhm.
And I know there's breaks between games in terms of the rounds, but Juju Watkins gets so much thrown at her. And I guess Caitlin Clark did too, and it didn't phase her. But Juju Watkins gets so much thrown at her, two or
Yep.
three bodies on every possession. And you could tell in that UCLA game she was fatigued.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering if, with all the bodies that are going to get thrown at her throughout this tournament, are we going to see something like that again here in the NCAA tournament? I do
Mhm.
have a battle of the USCs in the national championship game.
Same.
And I went with South Carolina for the moment. I haven't
Okay.
totally locked that in. I'm still waffling. I had UCLA in there in the Final Four, and I had Notre Dame in the Final Four as well. We'll see. It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be a great tournament.
We actually
Uh,
had this pretty similar for
yeah, our
if you got
brackets are
Notre
way too
Dame and the other
close.
ones. Like that's way too this is all gonna blow up on us.
Gonna have to
Can't wait for
change
that.
something.
That's
Maybe I'll switch out. But like USC, part of the reason I don't want to make them my champion, and this is like my thought process when I fill out brackets and upsets, I could see them easily losing in the Elite Eight to
yeah,
UConn. And so if I make them my champion, I don't see South Carolina losing in the Elite Eight to, I don't remember, Duke, I think is our 2 seed.
correct.
So I just don't see that happening. So I feel like I have a better chance if I make South Carolina my champion of keeping my champion alive
Yeah,
than the
keeping
road of
points possible.
USC's.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And Austin, I can sense we're getting ready to close this episode here in just a minute or so. The other thing I wanted to say is kind of like a final thought of this before we get into the March Madness and all this gets crazy, is the fact that the Big Ten got 12 teams into the NCAA tournament is something to appreciate and celebrate. And if you're a fan of a lot of these programs, if you had higher expectations, whatever, it is worth taking a moment just to celebrate being part of the field of 68 because I
Yep.
don't think anybody gets to do that as you notice. I mean, it's a 350, 360 plus teams, but your squad has made it into the NCAA tournament. That's worth celebrating. And UCLA, USC, I mean, how can you not love those seasons? You talk about stories like Illinois, where they're looking for their first tourney win in a quarter of a century. In my backyard here, Michigan State, this is the highest seed for the Spartans in 9 years. They have not been a 7 seed or better. That's worth celebrating. They're looking for their first NCAA tournament win in 6 years. That's worth celebrating. And maybe if you follow my bracket, a Sweet 16 for the first time in 16 years. So like there's a lot with all these different teams that is worth celebrating with those groups. It's hard to make the tournament. It's hard to do it consistently. And 12 teams making it in, setting a new Big Ten record is worth just taking a moment to celebrate before it all gets going.
Absolutely well said. And I still stand by the over-under I threw on it 2 weeks ago at 3.5 getting out.
Yep.
We've got 4 host schools. So maybe they all get out and they take care of it. Maybe somebody like an Iowa or Michigan State or Michigan gets through on a run. But I still think that'd be a pretty good betting line right now of 3.5
Yep.
Big Ten schools getting into the Sweet 16. I think we know 2 of them. And the question is, can more than that get through? I think they will. I think we're going to have at least 3 or 4 in the Sweet 16. And I think we're going to have a podcast talking about a team alive in the tournament for a couple more weeks here. I think we're going to have these LA schools hanging around. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. And we've had a lot of looks at them. I've seen USC twice, UCLA once. We got to see them in person out of the Big Ten tournament. So we'll have plenty to talk about. Hopefully we're talking about more than just them in this tournament moving forward. Dalton, let's enjoy it. Let's really enjoy what's coming our way here. I see that my video is getting extremely laggy, so let's wrap this thing up before we lose it. Thanks to everybody who joined us live, and we're excited. We're going to keep this thing rolling. We're hitting the road. I'm hitting it tomorrow. Dalton's hitting it Thursday, and we're going to go play some basketball. See what happens.
Let's dance, baby. Let's dance.
Let's dance. Well, thank you all for listening. A reminder, we're on the Back Home Network YouTube channel. Check us out there in video form. We're on the Apple and Spotify podcast feeds as well. So check us out there. Give us a download, a rating, all that stuff helps us. Tell a friend to dive of a Big Ten preview for the NCAA tournament. Tell a friend that we are available. Come find us. We put a lot of work into this, and I'm excited about what is coming for the Big Ten here in the NCAA tournament. For Dalton Shetler, I'm Austin Render. So long. We'll talk to you guys next time on the Dribble Drive.